One of my big problems during any big training block is sleep. It seems the harder I go, the harder it is for me to go to sleep and stay asleep. I wake up typically 4 or 5 hours into a sleep and my head is buzzing, my legs are twitching, and often I end up getting up, going to the couch, and watching TV. That is not a good way to recover.
No, it definitely isn't. And I think every endurance racer knows what you are talking about, Hottie. After a long day in the saddle, you go to sleep and your brain and legs still think you're on the bike. You got the trail running through your mind and you've got restless, achy legs. It is the worst. And it's even worse in Leadville where you've got altitude compounding everything. And it's a huge deal because sleep really is one of the pillars of successful training.
Well, my solution to this problem has come from our great partners at Floyd's of Leadville. The CBD drops taken in the evening put me in a state of relaxation. My mind is calm, my body settles down, and once I fall asleep, I stay that way. No trips to the couch, no counting sheep, just good old-fashioned deep sleep that gets me ready for the next round of training. Like the label says, relax and recover.
Be sure to check out Floyd's of Leadville, which is, of course, our presenting sponsor at floydsofleadville.com, and use the code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount on your first 2 orders.
And thanks to Floyd's of Leadville for sponsoring this show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. This is Season 2, Episode 8 of the show that breaks down, builds you up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
And Hottie, I want to kick off this episode with a note that came from one of our listeners. His name is Drew D. He says, I am loving listening to all of last year's podcasts as I wait for a new one. I got to say, just interrupting Drew for a second, I love hearing that people are going back to our old library. We have a ton of great content from Season 1. Anyway, Drew continues, thanks for all the info. A couple of questions. What is your favorite rain jacket that you carry? Also, do you wear it at the start for a chilly morning, or do you have a separate jacket for the start? Also, why, or I think he's meaning what? What are your favorite gloves for the 100-miler? Thanks again. And that is a great question, Drew, and it gives me an opportunity to talk about something that I wanted to talk about anyway, which is, and this is not an ad, by the way. We're not sneaking in an ad so early in the show, but it is the Gore R7 Gore-Tex Shake Dry Trail Hooded Jacket. Gore is terrible at naming products, but it is a fantastic jacket. I should mention that Gore did comp me this jacket, but I did not otherwise get compensated. It is a crazy good, light, breathable, and just insanely waterproof jacket. It is, and I'm super surprised that I didn't expect to want to have a hood on a riding jacket, but I love it. It goes under the helmet perfectly, hugs my forehead. Water does not go down my back and off my helmet and into under the jacket and into my jersey. And it is just so nice. It is also, I have to say, crazy expensive. It is $300, but it is money well spent, in my opinion, because I expect to never need to buy another rain jacket again in my life. It is, for hiking, for riding, the best rain jacket I have ever had by a factor of 3. Let's pick a number. I'll put a link in the show notes for that. Second question you had, for gloves, I've just used the Specialized Body Geometry Ridgeline gloves for, I think, about a decade, for as long as they've been out. There might be better gloves out. I don't know. These have been good gloves for me. I've used them. They're lightweight, very little padding, and I like them. At the start line, this is where things get a little bit more, I guess, MacGyver-y. I wear a thrift store jacket and thrift store track pants over my over the clothes I plan to wear for the race. and then I chuck them right before the race, just hand them over to whoever is next to me and ask them to just pass it over to across the starting line or onto the sidelines and assume that someone is going to throw it away. Weirdly, those same thrift store jacket and track pants always find their way back to me at the end of the race. I don't know how or why, but somehow I just keep using the same one. So I have this weird faux fleece jacket that I wear every year. I don't feel like I need a jacket after the start line. I'm cold on the pavement, but once you start going up St. Kevin's, I warm up very nicely. Hottie, how about you? What would your answers be to these questions, to Drew's questions?
First of all, you and I have the same taste in gloves. I, too, have used the BG Ridgeline gloves because they have that gel insert in them.
Yeah,
and
it's nice.
Basically, those only come out for a long day like Leadville. Otherwise, I like a non-padded glove. But for Leadville and the length of the ride and the roughness of that ride, over time, that gel does provide a nice assist. Even though it takes up a little room in your palm as far as how much of your grip you can grab, because there's more volume there in your hand when you have the gel insert. So, but I do like those gloves. They're terrific. Sometimes I wear gloves over the gloves at the start line. If we're talking about start line real quick, I'll have a pair of those. I probably go to the same store you do, the dollar store, and grab some gardening gloves and pull those over the ridge lines because the ridge lines aren't that warm. That way when I'm rolling out of town and it's 38 degrees or whatever it is going downhill, down 6th Street, my hands aren't freezing. And it's somewhere along the course, I can either toss them or throw them at a volunteer, and then I just wear the ridge lines the rest of the way. As far as the naming of your favorite jacket there, you know what? I think Gore did get this one right, although I don't own one. I've seen it in action. The Shake Dry, it does what that name says. Like if you get that jacket wet, like good and wet, all you got to do is pull it off, find some cover, pull it off, and shake the thing, and all the water just comes flying off it. Like, talk about repelling water. All you got to do is shake like a dog, and the thing's going to be dry all over again. So that might be the best name that Gore has ever come up with. My rain jacket, though, not quite as nice. Although it has been to some great places. It has been to two of the top massive peaks I can think of, that being Columbine and the Galibier. Oh. And while both of those mountains are special, the jacket is not. It's this yellow Adidas thing that I probably got online. I can't even remember the online bike store I bought it from. But that thing has been shuttled to the top of Columbine, where it waited for me and any potential rain. I made it to the top of Columbine, but the rain did not, so I didn't need the jacket there. When I made it to the top of the iconic Galibier in the French Alps, there was snow on the ground, but thankfully none was falling from the sky at the time. I put on the jacket anyhow for the descent. You know, the great thing about rain jackets is they are excellent windbreakers as well. I would love to have the Shake Dry, but $300 rain jackets in Southern California don't make a lot of sense. So unless I suddenly realize I have a close family member working for Gore, I'll stick with my $40 protection I have in my gear bag.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. I don't have a stake or stock in Gore, but if you are going to be, if you're going to spend $300 ever on a rain jacket, I would say On the Gore would probably be the place to do it. But I want to go back to Galibier for a second because I have an amazing memory of Galibier and rain, and so I kind of want to stay on that. This doesn't have anything to do with Leadville, but, stick with me for a second because this is one of my favorite cycling memories of all time. Back in 2012, I was lucky enough to get to go on a tour group on a week-long road tour with Andy Hampston's touring company, and we headquartered it in Le Grave, which is a short, a few miles from the Galibier climb. And I remember doing that climb, and my wife Lisa was there, and the rest of the group was there, and we were just amazed at how beautiful it was. And as we got to the top of the Galibier, from the other direction, there was a Fondo style event that was also getting to the top, and of course Andy Hampston is leading the group, and it was, I kid you not, just like being, it was like being on the stage with Mick Jagger. Maybe in the U.S. he could walk around undetected. In France, on the Galibier, absolutely not. Everyone knew who he was, and he was just mobbed. And it was actually really cool to just sort of be a part of that and just watch Andy, this amazing, American iconic racer just being, in his element, and, the way that he is loved over there is just incredible. Anyway, we went down to, down the other side of the mountain, stopped at a little French cafe, had some pastries, turned around and came back up. And I happened to be riding with Andy for a while. He took turns riding with everyone in the group, so everyone got a chance to sort of, be around this amazing guy. And I asked him about whether he was ever going to write a biography, and he got into it, and because he was thinking about writing a biography. And he starts forgetting to hold back as much as he normally does for, mere mortals like us. And he starts going faster and faster, and he is still talking conversationally. And I am 100% pinned. I was the strongest I have ever been that year. This is the year that I actually won the Leadville 100 single speed division. So I was strong. I could just only barely hang with him while he was still riding easy. Anyway, we got to the top, took some pictures. It was just an incredible day. Started down, and the skies just opened up. It was raining so hard, and the windbreaker that I had was not up to the task. It was, a river running down the pavement. I was soaked. I was frozen. It was windy. It was terrifying. And we got back to Le Grave and just soaked and freezing, and having had just one of the most amazing days of my whole life. And, now that I think about it, I'm going to kind of take it back. This is a world away from the Leadville 100, but I think it does have, in some ways, everything to do with the Leadville 100, just not the way we usually talk about it. In this show, you and I talk about things we can control, like our gear and our training and elevation and, your nutrition plan, all of that. And that's good. We're always going to do that because we want people to be ready for the stuff they can be. But our most amazing memories are moments in this race and other races where things go nuts, when the skies open up, when you crash, when you are cold and it's windy, and it is just, it is epically hard, when you can't eat without vomiting. Those are the moments that you remember, and I want our listeners to remember that, as you prepare for this race, when things go crazy, pay attention and enjoy it to the degree you can, because we're trying to have an adventure here.
Yeah, you can't control what you can't control. If things go sideways on you, you got one choice. That is to make the most of it. I remember being in a race where we were due to roll off the start line about 1 o'clock, and all of us got out there about 10 o'clock, not far from the center of Los Angeles here out in the high desert.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got out there, the sun was out, there were some mixed clouds out there. But by the time we rolled out, the clouds had gathered and the temperature had dropped. And we were at about 4,000 feet or so. And by the end of the first lap, when we were doing 4 of them, it had started snowing. It doesn't really snow in Southern California, but on this day, it started snowing. And here we are in a Masters race, going hard, and it's a climbing race nonetheless. And we've got a 50-mile-an-hour descent on top of it all. And you really have no choice at that point, but find a way, because it wasn't in the plan to have snow. But there it was. And there we were. And there's a buddy of mine here in town. He talks about this day all the time, how he and I ended up together. And together we managed to complete the 4th and final lap in the snow, in misery. But we did it. And we have that memory. It wasn't a winning memory. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, we weren't standing at the end on the podium with victory signs. But it's our memory. We have it now. And both of us chalk it up as one of our great days on the bike.
Yeah, and that really is the thing. We're all going to Leadville, and we're all trying to control the things we can control, but recognize that what you're after, unless you are, for some reason chasing after some kind of podium or something, is a story, something to think about, to tell your friends about, something that you are going to be able to look back on and embrace whatever comes your way. We're going to have an adventure, and that's Leadville, and it's an amazing place to have it. Guarantee if you look around and experience it, and look away from your computer, you are going to have something to tell friends about.
It's been a few months since I put in a long ride where instead of deciding the pace was dictated to me. But that happened recently. The ride, 117 miles, 6,000 plus feet of climbing. Actually, I may have underestimated the climbing. It may have been more than that. Maybe closer to 7,000 feet. Anyhow, 10 riders, 2 stops. We averaged just over 20 miles per hour.
Seriously, 117 miles and you averaged 20. That ride has to have crushed you. Yeah, you ride with some fast guys.
Yeah, these guys don't mess around, and that's the point. I mean, even be invited to this thing, you have to be able to prove to the guy who puts on the ride, that is, you can keep up. Pre-ride, though, the group ate French toast, which is probably why I struggled up the first climb. But the rest of the ride, I kept the energy levels going with a peanut butter and pickle sandwich, yum, bonk breaker bars, a couple of goo shots, and my secret weapon, Morton energy drink. Except for that bizarre sandwich, the rest came from our good old friends at the feed.
Oh, yeah. And I think you and I are really aligned on energy food. I'm planning a solo century around Utah Lake this weekend. It's flat, 100 miles. And I'm hoping to average solo 20 miles an hour, but honestly don't know if I have that in me this early in the year. But I'm going to be doing the same food as you. Morton energy drink, goo roctane, bonk breaker, and that peanut butter and pickle sandwich, which I now call the Hottie Special. It's a weird but wonderful change about 60 miles into a big ride. And like you say, everything comes from the feed.
Mm-hmm. It's worth noting our podcast listeners can get a great price on a pack curated for Leadville racers containing a lot of the items we have just mentioned. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville for our Leadville pack, and be sure to use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount. You can also use that Leadville15 code for buying any amount of Morton at a 15% discount. I'll be using that product again during all my big races this year.
As will I. Again, that is thefeed.com/Leadville, and use the code Leadville15 at checkout. The Leadville podcast is super lucky to have one of the fastest and most knowledgeable pros to ever do the Leadville 100, Jeremiah Bishop, as our gear guru.
And really here, pigeonholing him into talking about gear is a little bit of a disservice to our listeners. Jeremiah could really do our nutrition or our training or any one of our segments.
Yeah, he coaches folks. I would not mind having him as my own coach. He brings such an incredibly experienced perspective to what an endurance racer needs to know about gear, not just what the coolest shiny object is, but what you need to bring to be fast and to solve problems when things go wrong, which is what we're going to ask him about today. Jeremiah, welcome back to the Leadville podcast.
All right. Thanks for having me.
So this time, really the questions we have are super simple. What do you carry on a big race, and how do you carry it?
Well, it depends on how long the race is. In the case of single-day stage races that are 4 hours for the longest stage, yeah, it's a little bit different. 100-mile races, a bit different. And in the case of Leadville, it's sort of a combination between a road race and a mountain bike race. You don't really want to have a pack on you that's really unaerodynamic, and you also don't want to carry too much. So at least for Leadville, we would carry a multi-tool chain tool, which is made by Toe Peak. Mm-hmm. And then we would have a quick link, which is we use bread ties and put it around the barrel adjuster or tape it to the chain stays. So right where the chain breaks, You don't want the chain to come unlooped. You hopefully can stop before it comes, completely unwrapped from your rear derailleur. You can grab that chain link really quick, pull the chain closed. Of course, you want to push the clutch first, and then you have that quick link on, and then hopefully you can get back going. If it's a male to female brake, you might have to use a chain tool to get that female. And then we also have on the chain stays near the area where you might need them 3 zip ties. So basically, the marathon guys that you see at the front of Leadville in that particular edition, you'll see some very experienced riders, and they all have a little different system for carrying their tools, but everybody's got enough to prepare some of the key issues that we'll run into out there on course. Our flat kit, we're running some very light spare tubes. We have orange seal in the tires. We usually have some Gorilla Tape folded on itself, and that's your tire boot should you cut the sidewall. We have tire plugs with extra plugs in the ends of the handlebars. We've been using Samurais. There's a pretty cool product called the Hole Shot, which goes in the stem. A friend of mine just came up with these things, and you should check them out. But yeah, having plugs are key because you can fix a tubeless pretty quickly and then, get rolling in no time.
Yeah. So something worth noting on those is the hole plugs are only valuable and fast if you've practiced using them. You don't want to do anything for the first time in Leadville. I think we've driven that point home, but I didn't want to use those plugs until I had experimented, poking holes in an old tire and trying to get it so that it works. After that, fantastic. Absolutely.
That's a great idea, Alden.
And Jeremiah, chains have gotten so good these days. They're pretty amazing. I can't remember seeing I'm sure there have been broken ones on Leadville. I don't remember seeing one. Has it happened to you, and how fast are you with the little mini chain breaker you carry around?
I'm pretty fast with it. My fastest fixed chain is about 90 seconds.
Ooh, nice.
Wow.
And if I have to break the chain, I can do it in about 2.5.
So what's it going to cost for me to just have you ride alongside me as my sort of like my rolling mechanic?
We'll see. Talk to me after the show.
That might be outside my price range.
And they just one tube, Jeremiah, 2 tubes for Leadville we're talking about here. What's the tube count?
Yeah, so pretty much we don't change a whole lot for Leadville. It's normal marathon protocol. And marathon is what the Euros call long-distance mountain biking. Here we call it hundreds, or I don't know what we call it. But yeah, mostly the 100-milers and the sort of 4-hour plus distance races. But we have a protocol where you'll stop in the aid station if you do have a flat and grab a wheel. Even if you fix the flat, sometimes it's better to switch wheels, keep on going, or you get a CO2 and tube, even if you're holding air, so that you can fix the next one should you come into another flat later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is the nice thing about Leadville. You're never more than 20 miles away from another aid station. So you don't need to carry 100 miles worth of gear. You need to carry enough gear to make sure that you can confidently arrive at the next aid station where you can pick up whatever you need.
Mm-hmm. But at Margie Gessick 100, there's 0 outside assistance.
Wow.
So you'd better bring a lot of stuff. I had a pump, the plugs, spare chain link. I had all kinds of stuff you don't normally bring. Water filter. Yeah, I mean, a little different ball game. But yeah, this is very much like the marathon races in Europe, where you can stop, get stuff. Some people will even put their spare kit into like a black water bottle, with a screw-on lid. So it's very easy to pick up and you put it right in the cage go.
Yep. I have one of those barrels that is what you're describing, where you can put together a nice, complete tire change kit right in there, easy to swap in, swap out. So
yeah, a lot of stuff we do at Leadville is to optimize, our time. So taking a hydration pack, for example, for most amateurs could be a great strategy because you have your goos taped onto the shoulder straps, for example, and you have an exact amount of fluids, and it becomes a good system.
And making sure that it is a system. I know we're kind of coming back to a theme here, but whatever you do, make sure that it is not something you are trying on race day for the first time. Jeremiah, always a pleasure listening to you. Next time, what do you say we talk about wheels?
All right, sounds great.
You really get the sense when listening to Jeremiah that his fitness is only a tiny part of why he's so fast.
I know. My head's reeling from how fast he's able to repair a chain. He talks about 3 minutes and how everything he does is just so smart. He is ready to address truly any little issue or big.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Some fantastic advice from a racer who thinks everything through. And I think this is a good place to mention our buddies at Banjo Brothers, Fatty. The way Jeremiah was just talking about gear and attaching that to your bike, he obviously puts a premium on staying very minimal. Bring what you need, put it where you need, and I'm a big believer in that philosophy myself.
Yeah, I am too. I don't know if I have mentioned this before, but I actually use this Banjo Brothers small deluxe seat bag, even on my mountain bikes, as well as on my road bike. It easily holds a tire plug setup, a tube, a lever, and a CO2 canister. Super minimal, but it is enough for this race if you're distributing your tools the way Jeremiah was talking about.
Yeah, Banjo Brothers has a saddle pack for pretty much every occasion, whether you're riding super minimal or are rolling bike shop like some of us. Yeah. And like with other Banjo Brother items, you can get a 20% discount on that pack, which makes it the cheapest piece of mind you can buy for this race. Here's how you do it. Go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorite. Scroll down, sign up for offers exclusive to our listeners. You'll get a 20% discount coupon emailed to you.
Yep, Banjo Brothers is tough, practical, and affordable. They're based in Minneapolis, have been in business since 2003. And they're good guys who love to ride. If you are a good guy who loves to ride, you're going to identify with them. Go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites. Sign up. Go get yourself a saddlebag.
Envy has also been a terrific supporter of this show. And in addition to talking about their products, we also like to tap into their knowledge. So let's check in with the great team at Envy and discuss bar and stem combos. We're back with Jake Pantone of Envy Composites, supporter of the Leadville 100 podcast. First of all, Envy, thanks for supporting the Leadville 100 podcast and getting so many Leadvillers to the finish line with your products. I want to talk about something today, Jake, that I think gets a little overlooked, and that's bar and stem. The stem in particular seems to be, the lowly stem, right? I mean, how much attention do we really give it? It looks cool. I mean, kind of we go for looks, right? And the Envy stem in particular has ended up being this famously painted stem. I mean, so many custom builders are on painting your stems all over the place. And bar. So let's focus in on bar and stem combo. Okay. And what you would like to see the XC, the endurance racer, look at when considering their choice for a bar and stem combo.
Oh, yeah, great. So, I think the important thing with bars and stems is, like you said, they're often somewhat overlooked. And it's also an area where, a lot of bike manufacturers look to save costs in terms of how they spec out a bike. So oftentimes, the low-hanging fruit in terms of improving the performance on your bike, in terms of performance for the dollar, weight savings for the dollar, is to first look at your bar and stem, because it's definitely an area where where a manufacturer knows that consumers are going to overlook it and, not necessarily be so concerned about that aspect of the bike. So you can generally speaking, save some weight and improve the performance of the bike by replacing your bar and stem. Now for Envy, we feel it's our responsibility to create this Envy ride experience, which is one that's defined by comfort and performance, really, and performance being defined as responsive in all the right ways. So we want the bar to, be stiff in the directions or stiff when you're doing directional changes. So we want the bar to be very reactive and responsive to the inputs you want to put into the bar. But then in terms of absorbing vibrations, we want the bar to be comfortable. And so to accomplish that, we also have to take into consideration that the needs of an enduro downhill racer type guy are very different than the needs of a cross-country racer guy. And so we have a suite of products, a suite of handlebar and stem offerings that are aligned with our M Series wheel offering. So it's a full M Series family of products. So on the M5 side of things, that's going to be your cross-country race product. And then we blur the lines into M6, which is more of a trail category that has more rise options, a little bit more width. We go up to 780 millimeter wide bars in the M6 family. So for larger guys or people that want more rise or just like a wider bar, they can look at the M6 bar. And then on the stem family, we have a full carbon M6 stem. So the full carbon stem is all about incremental gains. Are you going to notice massive improvements in terms of ride quality from going to an Envy carbon stem from, say, the alloy stem? Not a ton. You'll save a fair amount of weight depending on what the stem is that you have, but there's also a level of compliance. So if you're looking for the ultimate in, performance, compliance, comfort, the Envy bar stem package is tuned to deliver that kind of performance as long as you buy the right bar and stem for what you're doing as an athlete. So, if you're racing cross country, then you're going to want to look at M5, M6. If you're an enduro downhill guy, you're going to want to look at M5 or M7 and M9 families of product.
The bigger the number, the harsher the conditions,
yeah.
the heavier the athlete is kind of the general guideline there.
Yeah, so what that actually stemmed from the first generation M Series, where we had this ratio of climb to descend preference. So it stemmed from an M50-50, was actually a 50% climb, 50% descend product. And on the other end of the spectrum, it was an M90-10, which was a 90% descend, 10% climb. So as we evolved into the next generation M Series, we've cut it down to the M5, 6, 7, and 9 family. But the same philosophies exist still. So yeah, M5 is definitely targeted at the guy that appreciates the climb as much as the descent.
I wanted to give some more love to the lowly stem. I think it does get overlooked in this world.
Yeah.
It's really too bad. And for off-roaders, I think they've been maybe a little gun shy about putting carbon there. I mean, and I don't know, I guess I don't know why, but why is that? Why should we be okay? Tell us why it's okay to run a carbon stem. I mean, you're a carbon company, I get it, that's what you're going to sell me, but why in Envy's mind is carbon the right way to produce a stem?
I mean, it's not always the right way if you don't do it right. So like anything in the world, there's things that are manufactured right, and there's right and wrong ways to do things. And so there's been really bad carbon stems out there, and I think a lot of people are maybe a little gun shy based on, just the whole process of bringing carbon into the whole bike. Over the years, there's been good and bad carbon products, and it's a science. It's something we're all learning every year, and we're getting really good at it. And Envy's been doing it at this point quite a bit longer than most. But we also have a unique approach to how we mold carbon, and so the stem is overlooked, but it is such a vital part of the bike in terms of your well-being. Yeah. The bar can't slip. The stem you can't have a stem that slips. I mean, that your livelihood depends on the stem, and we don't take that for granted. So, I mean, we throw all the resources we can at that product specifically, knowing that it has to perform 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of our testing, the goal, of course, is to make a highly reliable, safe product out of carbon. And it has to do something that aluminum doesn't. And in the case of our carbon stem, we can save a lot of weight and then add minor but additional amounts of compliance to the cockpit on the bike. And a lot of carbon stems have failed in the past to achieve those goals because it's expensive to produce a carbon part, and a lot of carbon stems in the past have just been heavier than an aluminum stem could have been, and not necessarily offering any added value to the bike. So with the Envy carbon stem, and it's really a unique stem because we're really the only ones making a full carbon mountain bike stem that is qualified for even up to enduro, like downhill type usage. Yeah. And again, it's the way we mold the carbon. have very extreme testing standards to ensure that it's safe. But the thing with carbon is that it's really strong. It doesn't have the fatigue life that aluminum does. So in a lot of ways, assuming it was molded correctly, it's much safer than aluminum. So, because it doesn't fatigue like aluminum does.
Now, at Envy, you guys make a connection between bar, stem, and wheel, right? I mean, that's to you a package.
Yes.
And it should work together even though the wheels are way far away from your bar and stem.
Yeah.
How to explain that theory to me?
I mean, it's a little more challenging with mountain bike because you have the suspension fork in the middle, which we don't have any control over. But where we really focus, of course, is in the ride quality of the rims themselves. And then, of course, trying to educate athletes on tire pressure. So tire pressure is really valuable. But of all the development we do, of course, is generally with Envy wheels as part of the system. So when we're doing our ride testing, there's sort of a standing baseline of performance that is the Envy wheel set. And I think that, yeah, I mean, effectively the design of the handlebars, you know, is always based on this, built upon this baseline of how an Envy wheel rides. And so we've noticed if you ride a different wheel set, sometimes the performance of the bar is actually accentuated because it stands in such stark contrast to, you know, often lower performance that, you know, say just a stock OEM wheel set's providing. So, but when you get that whole package together, you have, you know, the Envy design philosophy baked into all the whole bike, right? Because the wheel set is molded and designed the same way, and it's using the same philosophy as the bar and the stem. So in terms of like how the bike responds and the weight of the bike, the feel of the bike, it definitely works well as a family of product.
If somebody's on your website and they're trying to pick out, am I an M6 guy, am I an M5 guy, is there anything you can tell them? Because that's how we shop now. We don't really walk into shops anymore and, hey, Mr. Shop Guy, help me out. We're pretty much fending for ourselves online. And so I'm at the Envy website. How can I figure out, should I have M6 bars? Should I have M5 bars? Is there is any rules you can give people there?
There's a couple rules. We actually have some pretty good charts online in terms of like how to classify yourself as a rider, whether you're like an M5 or an M6 or an M7 kind of guy. So if you go to our M series page, you can find those charts. But yeah, a general rule of thumb, I think, is that if you're on a 100 millimeter travel bike or less, definitely if you're on a hardtail, you should automatically sort of pre-qualify yourself to consider M5. If you race rarely, but you're still on 100 millimeters, probably M6. And if you're a big guy, I'd probably just go straight to M6. But yeah, generally I kind of just say if you're on a hardtail or on 100 millimeters of travel, front and rear or less, then you should definitely look at M5 series.
Yeah, it sounds like our Leadville should be in the M5 or M6 class.
Most Leadville guys should definitely be looking at M5. I mean, the bar's nice and wide. It's a 760 millimeter wide bar. That bar is designed to be paired with an M6 stem because it's a 31/8 clamp diameter. So on the M5 and 6, we use a smaller clamp diameter than M7, and that's just to achieve a little bit more comfort and compliance out of it. Plus we can build a lighter weight bar that way. So and then the M5 bar is actually kind of cool from a fit standpoint. You can flip it, so it has a 5 millimeter drop if you flip it, so you can get a little bit lower, which is an issue for some smaller riders. Just trying to get low on 29-inch wheeled bikes. So yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll send them to envy.com for more. And again, thanks for supporting the podcast.
Thank you.
Hadi, I think a lot of us, including me for sure, tend to operate under the impression that the only way to get ready for the Leadville 100 is with volume. Just ride all the time. And that for sure is a piece of your training. Personally, I don't know where my head would be on the starting line in Leadville if I hadn't done a fair number of big rides. But most of us also don't have a ton of free time. We've got lives, and that creates a problem, right? So what we're going to do today is ask our Trainer Roads coach, Jonathan Lee, about that exact problem in this installment of his training tip segment. Jonathan, great to have you back. Hope your training is going great.
Yeah, still on track. We're building up toward nationals, and then since it's such a similar event, Leadville right after. So
Yeah. Now, it's kind of interesting. You and I live at such different ends of the distance spectrum and what we're focusing on. You've got those, full on in the red zone cross country races. All I think about is endurance. I'm thinking about all these long days. You're doing super fast, intense stuff. Where does duration fit into the cycling equation?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. This varies, and it basically it's not like a totally linear relationship. Okay, so initially it's a pretty steep curve, and then it starts to taper out. If you were to graph the relationship that I'll be talking about here in a second, but so basically, if you have a track cycling event, right, and we're talking, it's basically one lap as fast as you can go. The metabolic demands for something like that, they're very different than something where you go for 10 laps even, which seems a little strange because 10 laps wouldn't be that long around a track, but it's actually pretty darn different. Now, as the distance or the duration that you are spending on the bike gets longer, it begins to vary less with increases in time. So, for example, somebody that's doing a 20-mile time trial and somebody that's doing a 40-mile time trial, it's not going to be that different in terms of how you would train that person because the energy systems and metabolic demands that are being, put upon the athlete, they're actually pretty similar. Now, when you look at stretching this out over Leadville, and we're talking, the difference between doing something that's a 4-hour ride and a 10-hour ride, it's easy in our minds to go, I've never ridden 10 hours before. If you're in that situation, this is going to be, I really need to do that beforehand. While psychologically, perhaps that may help you for sure. There's an absolute benefit to that because you're going into no man's land, right? And you don't want to do that on race day in some respects. But physically speaking, you have to trust me on this. Your body, what it can do for 4 hours like that, it can totally do for 10 hours. You may bring down the intensity just slightly. It won't really feel like it, but you're basically tapping into the same gas tank and you're running the motor in a very similar manner when you're doing something that's 3 hours long, 6 hours long, even 10 hours long, 12 hours long. So it's interesting. Leadville is a big day, but you don't necessarily have to go out and put in a lot of big days beforehand. I'm perhaps even a more polarized example of this. I don't think that I'm going to have the ideal preparation for Leadville since national champs is the first and foremost goal, but I still am not worried about it, and I don't feel like I have to go out and do an 8-hour day beforehand to prove to myself that I can do Leadville.
Well, Jonathan, you'll just bring things to Leadville that you may not need there. You'll bring, quick bursts of power that you probably won't ever use there, but the fact is your endurance will be there because if you can finish a cross-country race, more than likely you can finish something much longer.
Yeah, absolutely right. Sure, you may not, finish it in, I guess what I'm getting at here is sure, if you just do really short training and really short stuff, I mean like, an hour long and then expect to do well there. Yeah, that may be a little tough. But, I mentioned this last time, our CEO did a huge amount of what we call sweet spot work, which is it's just below your threshold. You get a lot of benefit that you get from threshold work, but you don't get a lot of the detriment of all the damage that you get when you go over your threshold or at your threshold. He did a ton of that, and he did a lot of 90-minute rides. He did some 2-hour rides. He did some 3-hour rides. But really, his meat and potatoes were 90 minutes to 2 hours, somewhere around there. And he showed up at Leadville and got his sub-9 at his first try. So it's totally possible. And it's cool because for most of us, we have families or we have jobs that are demanding or, our first job isn't to be a pro bike racer. So, it would be unrealistic for us and discouraging if we put that sort of demand on us to say, I have to go out and do 10 hours on Saturday, when really we should be spending that probably with our families or our jobs or something else. So...
So if you take the perspective of someone who is shooting for an 11.5-hour finish, and there are a lot of racers who just want that. They just want to finish and not be sweating in the last half hour of the race. How many long rides should they be doing between now and the race day?
So I'd answer that, of course, in a very roundabout way, and I apologize for it. But I guess that the main thing is you have to look at what is actually going on with your body in that scenario. So physically speaking, if you're doing something that's 4 hours long, you cannot ride at your threshold for 4 hours. I'd even argue that very, very few people can ride at their threshold for an hour, even though it's commonly treated as something that's, analogous to that. You see that in hour record attempts. People can't usually ride specifically at their threshold the whole time. So, you're not going to be riding at your threshold. You're going to be riding below that. You're going to be riding at 70%. You're going to be riding at 60 something percent, something around there of your threshold. That's something you do for 4 hours. And that's also something that you'll end up doing for longer than that. You get to that position, you can kind of continue. But the big thing that I would say is you really have to look into the nutrition side of things. You have to make sure that, when you get to 2 hours into a ride, if you just do a lot of 2-hour rides, you can kind of cheat and get by without fueling yourself, but step up into 3 hours and then you have to fuel yourself, step up into 4 hours and you have to fuel. And then you have to kind of have this whole system in place where you make sure that you keep the energy levels topped off, because the effort level doesn't really change. It stays what it is, but the energy, you need to make sure that you have enough energy coming back in. So, really in terms of how many rides you should do, you should be doing enough to make sure that you're familiar with steady state power and your capabilities for those 3-hour efforts. And then you should also be doing enough long rides so that you have a nutrition plan that's sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the nutrition plan matters.
I used to love, Fatty, what Dave Weens would say about his training. He never did rides much longer than 5 hours when he was getting ready for Leadville. Now, we're not Dave Weens. None of us are. No. But it's a great example of how you can just manage it. Because really training, and what Jonathan is saying here, folks, is your training should be about being consistent. And just remember that it's cumulative. It's not what you do on one day. It's what you do over the span of several weeks. Those days after days add up, and it makes you a better athlete. Now, next time, if your year is all about Leadville, we're going to give you Jonathan's going to give you the 2 key things you should be focusing on to have a successful Leadville Trail 100.
Really good sanity check there from Jonathan Lee.
Yeah, volume is not everything, folks. Nope. One of the most important things I learned about getting ready for Leadville's distance wasn't from a cycling coach or magazine. It was from a marathon coach, actually coaches. The Hanson brothers are well-known runners, and they help others get ready for marathons. Now, distance runners are kind of in the same boat as Leadvillers, especially mentally. Many believe they need to go out and knock out those 20-mile runs or more to get ready. But the Hanson brothers say the 20-mile run is a waste of time and effort. They say in marathon training, the long run should be about 12 miles, maybe a little more. They also say that the 12-mile run should be preceded by a run the day prior that leaves the athlete a little fatigued. The thinking is that by doing some strenuous training the day before your Saturday run, that final mile, those final miles on Saturday, will put the athlete in just the right level of stress, while the 20-miler will just leave them whacked and unable to train for a couple of days. The fatigued 12-miler is then followed by a recovery run the next day, while the 20-miler can barely get out the door. The same theory could be applied to endurance mountain bike training. You could do a ride, say your big ride's coming up on Saturday, and you think you want to do 8 hours. No. You could do it this way. You could say, look, I'm going to go out Friday. Even like Friday evening would be perfect. You go out Friday evening, do a couple miles, maybe throw in a couple efforts there. Then get up Saturday morning, so you're already in a little state of fatigue. And instead of doing 8 hours, you do 5. Make the 5 count. Not a lot of stopping, not a lot of talking, not a lot of goofing around. Ride for 5 hours, then get your rear home, be with your family, get up the next day and do a recovery ride. You can kind of apply the same technique. So instead of getting 1 big day of training, you get 3 good days of training. I was looking over the Shimano website the other day, and I was just floored as to how much product that company has. There's the obvious stuff, the stuff they're known for, group sets, XTR, Dura, Saint, Ultegra, pedals, road and mountain. Where in the world would we be without SPD anyhow, right? But Shimano has also become a major player with shoes, especially the S-Fire line.
Oh, yeah. I love my S-Fire shoes, road and mountain. They save my feet. I had a really bad year before I discovered those, and now I don't even think about my feet anymore. But you're absolutely right. We tend to think about drivetrains and brake systems because they are the best at that. But Shimano does a lot of things really well. And you browse the site, you're amazed what they have. Clothing, both for racer and for recreationalists and commuters. Sunglasses, bags, including hydration packs. Tools, both for on the bike and in the shop. They even have a camera to capture that harrowing descent down Powerline. And then there's Shimano's whole pro line of contact points, including saddles. I am such a huge fan of the Griffin saddle, Hottie.
What we're trying to say here is Shimano is much more than chains and cranks and cassettes and shifters. They make just about everything for you and your bike. In fact, that's about the only thing they don't make is the bike. So you supply the frame, fork, and tires. For everything else, go to bike.shimano.com. We'll also have a link at Leadville100podcast.com. All right, let's wrap up Season 2, Episode 8 of the Leadville 100 podcast presented by Floyd's of Leadville. If you like our little show, give us a 5-star rating. So little show, big rating. Get it? And review over at Apple Podcasts as well. Leave some comments there, some good stuff. Also, share with your other cycling friends and support our sponsors, please. Let them know you appreciate them making this show possible. Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the Leadville100podcast.com website, comment section, and get in touch.
Yeah, and follow us on Twitter. I'm at Fat Cyclist. Hottie is at Michael Houghton. You can also find us on Facebook. We are both super active in the Leadville 100 MTB participants group. If you've got a question, you can DM us, which is what Drew did, and why, look, he was responsible for the first 15 minutes of the show today. There's a good chance we'll answer you right there, and, maybe we'll answer you right here as well.
Good luck in your training. Thanks for listening, and we will see you at the start line.